Okay, so hopefully some of you have already attended virtual meetings of the IETF before, but here's a set of instructions that we ask that you follow. Typically, people keep their video off to conserve some bandwidth. Muting your microphone is good because occasionally there are echoes or other problems that come up. For adding yourself to the microphone queue, we use the WebEx chat portion, which you can find in the WebEx toolbar. If you do a plus Q, that will add you to the queue. Minus Q will remove the queue, and the chairs will monitor the queue. We do have a blue sheet to sign on the Etherpad, I believe.
Yeah, I just shared the link in the chat, so please go ahead and mark your attendance.
Okay, and we have a Jabber room going. It would be great if somebody can Jabber scribe. We're also looking for a note taker. Mohit, did you say we have somebody who's able to take notes?
Yeah, so I'll be doing the Jabber scribing and also maybe taking the notes, but Max Krone has offered to help, so that's great, Max. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Max. You know, the more that we can get, really what we want to do is capture major, you know, any sort of decisions or action items, and discussion points are kind of the main thing. We go forward here, and this meeting will be recorded as it is being now, I think. I don't know if it shows up anywhere, but in any case, there is the note well. As always, this is under the standard IETF IPR rules. You should be familiar with this. This kind of explains that you should need to disclose any IPR you know about things that are work in progress. That being said, so here we are, virtual interim, May 2020. This is, I think, the first virtual interim for a EMU meeting over its entire lifetime. So this is a historic event. We do have an agenda. So I think we've made it through our administrivia, and we have some topics on TLS-based EAP types, some update on TEEP errata, TLS PSK, aka PFS, EAP noob, TEEP brewski, and then if we have time, we had a request for some agenda time on EAP peer configuration. So if we have time at the end of our agenda, we'll do that. There has not been a draft submitted for that, and it's not a working group item, so we've kind of put that as the low priority, since this is an interim when we want to try to use it to get our work done. Does anybody have any comments or questions on the agenda?
Yeah, Elliot is in the queue. Go ahead, Elliot.
Hi, you guys. Good morning, good evening. I think we have a duplicate agenda item here. The TEEP brewski and TEEP errata and updates probably should be combined.
All right, awesome. So we'll just put those together. And will you be presenting?
I'm going to present. I'm not going to go through the errata in detail because the person who answered them, Oleg, couldn't be on the call. It's you know, Friday evening in Jerusalem is not exactly conducive to him, but he can make the next one maybe. But I can talk about the rest of the updates.
Okay, perfect. So when we get to that section, you can just cover both of those things.
Yep. And you pick whichever order you want me to present.
Sure. All right. Any other questions on the agenda? Okay, so let's see. Do we have, for TLS-based EAP types, do we have a presenter online for that? We look a little bit sparse. Is Alan online?
I'm here.
Perfect. Can we see your slides?
Yeah. Not a lot. If you want to go to the next slide, there's really only one thing of actual content, and that's you know, we seem to be okay. At least one implementer, major implementer, has said they'll do it. The comments for Eat Fast seem to be okay, but it wouldn't hurt to have someone else double check that. The updates for TEEP are here for now because I think the other documents are going to be a bit delayed. And those have been reviewed and seem to be okay. So I think we're mostly pretty good. It's implemented in WPA Supplicant Host AP because Unimolinen does absolutely everything. And we're working on implementing that in pre-radius. So for implementers, there are open source implementations they can test against to be sure that it all works. I don't have anything else.
Okay, so to clarify, so this document does contain some information about Eat Fast?
Yes.
And what we would be asking is that Eat Fast implementers, so I think kind of Nancy and Elliot and anybody else who has Eat Fast implementations, if we could review that part of it, because it sounds like that might belong in this document.
Yes.
And then for TEEP, I think right now the belief is those updates will go into a TEEP specific document.
For me, I'm okay with it either way. It's you know, they're small enough that they can go here unless Elliot has other comments.
No,
Yeah.
actually, this is Elliot. I apologize for taking the floor. I don't have a problem with Alan doing the TEEP update there, and then but we should just get to the TEEP discussion because there are other issues. The one question I had for Alan is I looked over your document and thought it was really good, and I'm glad you wrote it. The only question I had was, did you handle the restart in TEEP, which is really, it's quite sort of linked to early versions of TLS?
As in the fast session resumption?
Yeah.
I believe that's there. I'll double check it.
Okay.
So I guess one of the things we're looking for is reviewers to kind of make sure that we have the Eat Fast stuff correct and the TEEP stuff correct. So I need a couple people to volunteer or either here or on the list to kind of provide a review.
I can certainly tackle TEEP, but I'm not an Eat Fast expert, but I can see if Oleg will be willing to tackle Eat Fast.
I mean, I can try and take a look at it too.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be helpful just to make sure
Take a look at it too.
Awesome. Yeah, that would be helpful just to make sure we. That is some echo. That is some echo. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. All right, so I think once we have that, some of, a good review of this document, we can probably start bringing it to working group last call to see if we can move it forward. I think we do want to make sure we get some review of these things first. All right, Alan, anything else you want to cover?
Nope, I think that's it.
Awesome. So if we go back to the agenda, TEEP, errata, and others. Do I have, so if we look at whichever one do we have slides for both of these up?
I sent you slides a few minutes before the meeting.
Okay. So are they uploaded yet? Do you know? Let's see. Do we see them here? Mohit, do you have the ability to upload?
Yeah, I'll do that in a second. So then.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're in the email 554. So
We could give you you could take the ability to present, Elliot, if you want to do that. If you want to.
I can do that. You guys can upload them as you go. Okay. All right, let
We
me.
have them. That's good. Thanks.
Let's just see. There aren't too many slides here, so but I think this will be sort of funny because I think you'll find at least some of it amusing. Okay, so you know, people notice that oh, sorry, there's an echo. If you're not presenting, could you mute? That would be me. Okay, so great. You'll notice that there's not a draft update yet. Basically, I took the philosophy that before we do the draft update, we had better have some really good, a really decent implementation available of both client and server to try and play around with. And doing that without code is hazardous, and I want to talk about why. All right, so I started to implement the PKCS 10. In fact, I'm just about done implementing the PKCS 10 packet format for in TEEP. It says you can do PKCS 10. You can have a PKCS 7 response, and all this is great. Okay, when I went and looked at actually doing PKCS 10, I looked at the references, and they're actually calling for a reference to Ike, which I think is 49.5 or 4549. I always get the numbers backwards, the RFC number. And it's in this one section. It's reference like 6.4 of this document. So I go and I look it up, and sure enough, yeah, they're using enveloped PEM or something that looks like that, right? For PKCS 10 formatted message to go across the layer at layer 2. And I actually, it's not hard to implement this, right? OpenSSL has all the code to do this. And sure enough, I did it. And that's not so much a problem, except it's a wasteful bandwidth. So then I go to implement PKCS 7. And the first thing I discovered was that the PKCS 7 TLD isn't PKCS 7. It's CMS. And that's because the reference is to CMS down here. And the encoding isn't this. It isn't a PEM encoding, it's binary dir. So for those who are keeping track of the situation, we're shipping upstream a sort of PEM-like message, and downstream dir. And then the downstream is supposed to be PKCS 7 because that's what everything says, but the reference is to CMS.
That's because CMS obsoletes PKCS 7.
Okay, then we probably, the big question, Rush.
No, it's just terminology, right? That's why everything in CMS is called a P7C or whatever.
So good that you're on the call. I'm glad you joined just in time because I have a question for you. Because I literally discovered I discovered this yesterday or the day before as I was doing the code, and my question for you is the binary structure for a bag of certs for PKCS 7 different in any way than the binary than the bag of certs for CMS?
No, they're exactly the same.
Okay. So this is merely this is barely even an errata if it is. Right.
It's like when somebody says SSL and they mean TLS. It's the same issue.
Because that's not the case for other parts of CMS versus
There's only one place, and that's in the content. Well, CMS has had things added, and the version number has been updated to reflect it. But the only difference is the octet wrapper are in content info.
In content, yes.
Explained in the RFC.
Okay. So I actually like this format. I think it's fine, but another discussion has been raised about, great, what do you do when you get one of these things? And there's a sort of a discussion going on in the on the OpenSSL list as well. How do you store these darn things? And, don't worry about that in the IETF because it's not on the wire. But I'll just raise this as something that, as an implementation issue that was just also identified this week in a separate context, which is you have to store these things in some way other than dir, probably, when you put them to disk, because the ability to manipulate dir in OpenSSL, there are at least some limitations there. Again, it's an implementation issue. It's not so much a protocol issue, but it is something that sort of came up.
I thought there were, but Elliot, for PKCS7 and stuff, hi, this is Sean Turner. I thought that there were already like file extensions defined in the whole 9 yards and a MIME content type in the whole shoot and match.
There are. It's just that the tooling isn't, in some cases, isn't up to the job. And that's okay. Like, again, we do the protocol, we do the wire protocol stuff. The actual OpenSSL code, is not what we write to, right? But I'm just noting that
I agree.
This was identified, earlier this week. And you can, if you're on the OpenSSL users list, you'll see the messages being discussed in a different context. So these are sort of, this is a little bit of an inconsistency, the PKCS10 format versus the PKCS7 format. The other issue that we ran into is the request action frame. It's not necessarily the easy, it's not clear what it means, to be honest. Read 7170. We know what we want it to mean, but it isn't that. I should explain what we want and who we is. The we is Owen and I, who have been looking at this. What we want is a lockstep protocol, which says where the server can say, "Hey, client, can you send me one of these frames filled out? One of these TLVs filled out." That's what we want. But the request action frame actually requires that you send a full TLV, the type, the length, and the value. And so, if I send a client a request action frame that contains a short length of just the size of the type and no value as part of a request action frame, understand it. And it just says that you should process it. But what does that mean? So there's this discussion here in section 4 of 7170 leaves one a little bit unsatisfied. And so we have choices. Like, one possibility is that we say, well, if it has a zero length, if the length only covers the type, then the type is the only thing you care about. In which case, the intent there is that the client should try to send to the server a TLV. And if it can't, it should fall with it should use the failure action that is given as part of the request action frame. But that's what we'd like. It's not what it says. And so as part of the update, we should probably clarify this. Now, the other possibility is, oh, heck, Yoni's already using the request action frame in context, just as it's written. TLVs are cheap. We could just define a new TLV for what it is we want, which is what I just described. And so that's one possibility. The other possibility is, well, really, we shouldn't even bother to do what we want because what we want is wrong. And the reason it might be wrong is, suppose that there's a TLV that we want the client to process, but it needs parameters from the server. Then you'd like something more complex, in which case you need to pass more information. So these are sort of the issues that we're addressing. I personally lean a little bit towards the approach that the approach that I said we wanted, which is that we'd like to be able to say, here are some IANA types that we'd like the peer to send back to us, completed. And if it can't, then indicate then process indicate a failure mode based on what the request action frame tells you to indicate. Let me stop there. Any questions? Because that was a lot that I just discussed right there. Or comments? And I'm not looking at the chat, so I have no idea what's going on in the chat, if anything.
I don't see anybody in the chat. I think, what I think would help is to have some discussion on the list, and like if you could, describe the use case, because it's not really clear. I think it's a fairly detailed discussion of what you're trying to do and whether request action, as you say, is the right mechanism or not. If it is the right mechanisms, it sounds like we should probably we should figure out what's the best way to address it, whether it's clarifying the behavior so that you can do what you want, or maybe what you're trying to do really is something else. But it sounds like it's fairly close to request action, but I think we'd want to have that discussion with the more details so that we can figure out what it looks like.
So Joe, I actually did put a message out on the list. In fact, there were a couple of, so one of those wonderful moments where Cisco was arguing with Cisco, if you will, on this. And no, we're not religious about this, either Oleg or me, in terms of how to resolve it, but we would like some comments and some thought on it. What this leads up to, though, in conjunction with the errata, and you'll notice that I haven't covered the errata because Oleg did, and he didn't get a lot of feedback from anybody on the list regarding the errata, because he posted responses to each and every one of the errata. So, and I'm not going to try and do my Oleg imitation on this, but there were a couple of areas where we know that there were some issues, and clearly the errata, I think all of them get to be verified in some way, shape, or form. But just verifying them isn't enough. We have to actually have the text really clear. But if you look at like Yoni's code, for instance, one of the good examples is, well, what if you don't have an inner method? And our use case that we have for IoT is that in general, you wouldn't have an inner method. You're not going to have an inner eat method in TEEP. You're going to basically, the goal here is under normal circumstances, TEEP will behave almost identically to EAP TLS, and occasionally the server will say things like, okay, renew your certificate, or okay, we'd like you to do a RAT attestation when that TLB gets defined, right? Or somebody else might want, have something else they want the client to do that we haven't thought of because, it just hasn't struck our imaginations yet. And we like that lockstep approach, but in the general case, we don't see a need for IoT, at least, for there to be an inner method. So this MSK issue is one that absolutely has to get resolved. And this further leads up to the question of, given the amount of changes that we're talking about, should we bump the version of TEEP as we do these fixes? So that's, those are the questions that I have. And with that, I'll stop. Questions, comments?
Hi, so this is Mohit. Like we have three different TEEP related issues. So one is, of course, fixing the TEEP errata, and that's of course critical. Then there's the question of how does TEEP work with TLS 1.3, and then there's the third question of TEEP, new usage of TEEP for Brewski, IoT, and other things, and perhaps repurposing this request action frame or defining a new TLV. And I'm wondering, like, where and how this is all organized is a little bit unclear to me. So it might help, like, for the TEEP experts to sit down and agree, like, we are going to have two documents. This is where this goes and this is where that goes, because I mean, personally, I think having TEEP the 7170 with TLS 1.3 and all the errata fixed could be one document, and then these updates, T portion 2 could be a separate RFC. But that's, yeah, I guess up to you, the TEEP experts. So I'm hoping that Joe, Yoni, and others can like go through the errata, and then somehow we could reach like some sort of conclusion on this, because they have been open and there have been comments, but we haven't closed them.
Yeah, so, okay, 2 points. First to Tim C. Thanks for the comment. I agree, we shouldn't, what we shouldn't do is say you must not have an inner method, right? It's just that it has to, the mechanism should work both for when there is an inner method and when there isn't an inner method. And right now, there's confusion about what happens when there isn't an inner method. And so that's what needs to get fixed. To your point, Mohit, I don't see a whole lot of value from an IoT perspective of implementing TEEP until we until we clear up all of this. So the more documents we have, the more of a mess it will make to me. I'm very comfortable with Alan handling 1.3, because especially if he's already done it and he's already done fast restart. It's an area where I don't have a lot of experience, and he does. And so I'm comfortable with him doing that. In fact, if we do bump the version, what I would want to do is basically nab his code, because this is going to take a while to do. Or nab his text later on for the update. So my view is, let's just do one document, because one document is more than I can handle in terms of at least the amount of writing that I would want to do. And let Alan's document continue as it is with TEEP in it, because if he's got the work already done, why should we stop that fix, right? It's good work. Let's just keep going.
Yeah, I mean, the lesser the documents, the better for me. I mean, there's less things to review, read, and send to the ISG. I guess then my slight preference is to even have those 1.3 update in your single document, because there isn't any way I can implement TEEP with TLS 1.3 until I know what to do with the data. So if you want to take the ball and have it in a single document, that's fine by me. I was just thinking the fewer places those things are, the better then. But again, like no strong preferences.
I think the order of operations here is, first of all, somebody needs to actually look at Oleg's message and either verify or reject the errata, right? Because he's done that work. If we can have the errata verified, rejected, discussed, whichever. Joe, you did a good round one time. If you could take a second pass, that would be very helpful.
I'll commit to doing that.
Okay. And then if somebody can poke Yoni just to see if he's comfortable with Oleg's answers, then I'd say we have ourselves a ball game. And if those errata are verified, then people can do what they were going to do with TEEP. We're going to, with the existing version, and use that to move forward. I'll start, I have a question in my own head as to, do we bump the version? I'm inclined to do so just to clean up some of the text. How important is that? The most important thing, I think, is that we get the request action frame correct. You'll notice I didn't discuss the Brewski frames. Those are actually the easiest ones to do, because they're really just piping through. But we have other things that we have to look at still with PKCS10. There are a couple of corner cases that I didn't discuss. For instance, there is a form of channel binding that is suggested in 7170, which which I think requires review as part of this as well. So I expect we'll be, I expect we have a good bit of work to do in terms of all of these fixing the just PKCS10 and getting PKCS7 implemented and comfortable. And it sounds like that would be the best plan to go forward with.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I'll mark in the minutes that Joe and Jorge will review the resolution to errata filed by Oleg. So we
Fantastic.
can then try to close. That sounds good.
Okay, thank you.
And as far as TLS, I mean, as far as updating the version, I think we need to see what the changes look like. And, you know, I don't think there are a lot of implementations out there, but if we are going to make, you know, breaking changes, then we probably should bump the version.
Yeah, it is not necessary to I mean, unless we redefine what either the PKCS10 format or the or the which one call it the request action frame. It's not necessary to bump the version, but I think we probably want to clean those up. So that's really the discussion that I think we should have as we get the draft. And if people are comfortable with this way forward, what I'll do is I'll put forward a draft with Jim and Nancy and Owen that really looks a lot like the old TEEP RFC, but has a lot of the stuff cleaned up.
Cool.
Okay. Now, just before I leave the floor, I'll also mention that when you see that, we'll include the one of the things that seems important, at least for some IoT uses, is to have a CSR attributes message. This is present in RFC 7030 and absent in TEEP, and it's an inconsistency that we need to clean up. And so we'll add that as well. And then we'll look at the Brewski stuff as we go forward. But less important than I think getting TEEP cleaned up a bit more.
Okay, any other questions or comments for Elliot?
Thanks for your time.
Okay, is Yari on, or no, who's going to talk about TLS PSK?
Yeah, that would be me, unless John decided to show up. He's on kid leave, so I think I'll take the ball and present. So yeah, basically before the IETF that was planned to be in March, John, I, Thomas, and Owen submitted a draft which basically doesn't have much content and only headers. Trying to answer the or trying to start with the version that specifies how to do PSK authentication with EPTLS. Joe, if you can go to the next slide. So even though RFC 5216, which is the original EPTLS specification, doesn't explicitly forbid PSK authentication, it does say in section 211 that the server must include TLS server certificate handshake message, and a server hello done handshake message must be the last. So kind of, even though it doesn't explicitly rule out PSK, it was implicitly implying that PSK authentication isn't supported, and the updated draft to work with TLS 1.3 now explicitly says that PSK authentication shall not be used except for resumption. And one of the reasons was the comments from Bernard Aboba saying that EPTLS with certificates is used in many high security applications, you know, in the US, and he doesn't want the EPTLS method type to be mixed with other forms of credentials. So there was a general consensus that we do require PSK authentication, but it should be kept separate from EPTLS with certificates, and that was the reason that we started this work in a separate document. If you go to the next slide. So why do we need PSK? I think I'm not going to spend much time in justifying this because while we do have EAP PSK without the TLS, it does not provide identity protection and perfect forward secrecy. So it's better to like use a modern protocol like TLS 1.3 for doing PSK authentication. And there is EAP password, which is good if you have low entropy user entered passwords, but it does require opaque, and currently CFRG is running opaque selection process, so we should rather wait for that. And at least the password has some side channel protections that may not be suitable on IoT devices. So to counter these side channel attacks, it requires some extra computation which may not be suitable. So that's the reason we want to do EAP TLS 1.3 PSK authentication inside EAP.
CFRG has finished that process. Selections are made now. They're working on the documents, the two.
Right. Yeah, that's true. So the selection is done, but we still don't have RFC with the actual PEG. But yeah, point noted. And I think even when we have that, we would still want to have EAP TLS PSK. So I think having that PEG for user entered passwords is fine. And when that's done, we can see if there is a need. Actually, I have that on the next slide. So Joe, if you go to the next slide. So when we submitted the document, no, yeah, that's fine. So no, just if you go back once. So yeah, so when we submitted this document, there was discussion on the list that PSK is not the only credential type that is supported by TLS. So of course, PSK itself implies whether you do PSK key exchange or PSK with Diffie-Hellman for perfect forward secrecy. Then Russ has a RFC on doing authentication with external PSKs while also using certificates. There's a couple of individual drafts. One is on this quantum relief with TLS and Kerberos, basically using some form of Kerberos tickets with TLS, and then Hannes has this draft on CBOR web tokens in TLS and DTLS. So the thing is that if we are going to do EAP TLS PSK authentication, what about these other variations of credentials type that are either currently supported by TLS 1.3 or may in the future come? And yeah, now you can go to the next slide. So there's the question, more fundamental question before we begin specifying EAP TLS 1.3 PSK is do we only want to do it for PSK, or do we want to have a generic TLS tunneling method, and then any credential type that TLS currently supports or might support in future is supported? So I listed pros and cons of both. So if we only do EAP TLS PSK, it's more easier to handle. We'll need like we can provide better guidance on what's the relationship between PSK identity and the NIE. We can probably like tailor the specification for IoT deployments, like get rid of code that provides fragmentation support, and like we can be more specific. On the other hand, this might later come back to bite us if there is a lot of new credential types that are supported with TLS, including CBOR web tokens. Then we'll have a new EAP method type for each of them. So we'll have several documents and several method types. I mean, we are not running out of the EAP method space yet, but that's a like question for all of you to answer. What do you feel? And knowing that some of these drafts are currently individual submissions, so I'm not sure, they might like change dramatically, and I'm not sure how much interest there would be to like bring those support those credential types in EAP. So, and also like there will be less scope of tailoring implementations if we have like a generic EAP TLS everything other than client and server certificates. Go ahead.
Thanks for presenting this. The only question I have is that ETLS 1.3, well, excuse me, TLS 1.3 specifies in the credential object that the credential can be either a certificate or a naked public key. When we did ETLS 1.3, did we hold to allow for both?
Did you mean a PSK or a naked public key?
Naked public key.
Did I hear? No, we have only specified for certificates. So yeah, no raw public keys.
So we should probably, I mean, I think it's probably, I would like, if possible, for us to track TLS, right? So that, you know, if somebody wants to use naked public keys, they can, right? And so I think, I don't know about everything under the sun TLS, but adding back the support for the naked public keys that's already specified in TLS 1.3, that seems to me to be a very reasonable thing to do.
Sure, yeah. I mean, would that be in this document that does PSK and?
Yeah, I don't know if you call it just a PSK document, but you say in this fourth bullet, right, EAP TLS everything other than basic client and server certificates. So I sort of fit that into that bullet.
Right. Okay. So then we'll have like, yeah, as it is currently. So we'll have one document for EAP TLS with client and server certificates, and then another one with basically PSK and raw public keys to begin with, and you don't really have an opinion about others.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big fan of everything under the sun approach, but certainly that particular one, given that it was specified by the TLS working group, there's good reason that they did specify it, which is that you don't have to have a full PKI blown out to do public-private key pairs. I understand their purpose there, you know, and it seems to me that we should try and hold as closely as we can to their document and its structure where possible, and so that the use cases that they have in mind are also supported at the lower levels.
Understood. Go ahead, Joe.
I just think we want to be careful about opening up or just trying to accommodate all the use cases. Not that I think raw public keys is fine. It's not a comment to that, but just in general, this comment of everything under the sun, I think we really want to try to get the group to focus on what are really the modes that are going to be important for the EAP use cases, and not try to cover all of them. Unless, like, I mean, if it comes out that, hey, we just need to, then perhaps that is the right thing to do. But I'd rather see us, you know, focus on a few things and make sure that we understand them and we understand how they're going to be implemented and used, so we can document the right guidance for using them.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I think it's better to have something more specific and concrete that we know works, rather than having some drafts which might be moving targets. So yeah, Russ has a comment. Go ahead, Russ.
I do think the PSK with certificates needs to be supported, and it's, you know, Bernard doesn't seem to want to put that in ETLS, even though I think it meets the same authentication model that is already in ETLS. So my question is, where does it go? Because I think the concerns that people have about the post quantum support is important.
I think we could, at least I'm open to addressing it in this new document we are working on. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't do that. I mean, your document is already an RFC, so it's not like a moving target. We know what are the new extensions, so at least I am open to having it in this document. So we'll do then PSK with the raw public key and then PSK with certificates. If that's fine, then let's agree to that.
I think Roman's also in the queue.
Hi, yeah, this is Roman. I just wanted to reiterate, I mean, if we have a choice between what to put in or everything to put in, I would let what the implementation community is willing to write code around drive what we do. And if we need to make updates later, let's do that. But let's focus on the things that, you know, the community wants to kind of build tooling around.
Understood. I think we seem to have a consensus that everything under the sun is not really the best way to move. So, yeah, we'll work on that. So we'll do the PSK raw public keys and PSK with certificates.
And I think Roman's point is really good, just in the context of, you know, where we are with TEEP and having a lack of implementation at the time we were developing TEEP, you know, really did not help us. So the more we can move forward with implementation guiding us, the better.
We have an implementation of ETLS 1.3 with PSK. Of course, it currently doesn't do this PSK with certificates, but that's something we can look into doing that. So yeah, I mean, we have one implementation. It's early prototypes, which was basically to guide us while writing the draft. So, and yeah, it's open source and so on. So yeah. Sounds good. We'll update the draft based on the discussions here and present it at the next meeting. Unless there is anything else, I'm done. Yeah.
Any other comments for Mohit? All right, do we have somebody who can give an update on AKA PFS? I know there was a new draft, probably just a refresh posted. Does anybody have?
Yes, this is Jari. I can
There we
talk
go,
about that
Jari.
briefly. And I'll also post the link to the diff for the new draft on the chat room or on the chat room. And I don't actually have a whole lot to say. I have one issue that I do want to discuss a little bit and get your feedback. But from my perspective, this draft has been in relatively stable state for a while. And one issue that we did have was we discussed in IETF 106 was this, like, you know, should we have more than one algorithm / group / curve? There's only one now defined, and then there's a question of like how does that get actually, where's the registry and what are the details, and, you know, what is mandatory, what is optional, and so forth. So in this update, because I did have to do this week a refresh just for the sake of avoiding the expired draft situation, but I also added a proposed fix or proposed extension to this issue of just having one curve. And so we previously had the 25519 there, and just now I added NIST P256. And the draft talks about both of those, points to the relevant documents, and it does say that the 25519 is required and the other one is optional. Now, this is very early proposal for the working group, so it's basically sort of a strawman proposal from my side for addressing this part of the discussion. And looking forward to your comments. Basically, it could be of any nature, like, you know, we don't need this other thing at all, or we need a specific number, like 1 or 2 or 3. So now there's another, like, one alternative thing. And also, I can't claim that I'm at all sort of aware of the details of this NIST curve or group, and so it might be that my specification of what actually is said there about the details is wrong. So I would request you to take a look and give some feedback either now or later. Again, the link was in the server room. And Mohit and I were also struggling today a little bit to find the exact correct reference for P256. And so what the draft actually ended up doing is to refer to this SEC2 version 2, which is from the SEC group. That is, I think, no longer active, but even this year we published RFCs that refer to that spec. So maybe that's right, or maybe there's something else that we should be referring to. That's another area of comments. If you like this idea of P256 to begin with, then maybe you want to take a look if our references are right or wrong. Well, I'll leave it here. Mohit, do you have anything to add from our discussions today?
No, I think we have a couple of people in the queue. So I don't know, Joe, did you have something to comment?
No, I think we should take the quick questions from the queue.
Yeah, Ross, go ahead.
Hi. So yes, I like the addition of P256, and I think you should point to the NIST document. I can forward you a reference.
I was looking for one, but couldn't find one that's not draft.
Oh yeah, there is. But anyway, they end up being the same, but I think the NIST one is the more frequently referenced one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I think Elliot was in the queue and then said what Russ said. So yeah, so I haven't had a chance to look at it yet, but I think this is, it sounds like a good addition. I would encourage people to review this because this is one of the working group items that we have, and we'd like to get something out so that maybe through GPP could make use of it.
Yeah, and just a sort of small follow-on. So my idea is that perhaps we could just solve this issue one way or the other, and then move forward with the draft and submit it to the last calls and such. I did have one more question to Russ and Elliot and others who might have opinions. Like, if you're happy with P256, but do you think one alternate is the right number, or did you want to have other ones as well?
I don't have an opinion on this. I leave it to Russ.
I'm happy with the two you've got. Are you going to set up an IANA registry so that more could be added, 5 years from now?
Yeah, the new version of the draft has that. Or there was a registry already previously, but now it has 2 entries. Not one.
So I think it starts with 2. That's fine.
Any other questions for Jari? All right, thanks, Jari. Let's see, do we have a presentation on Noob? Thomas,
Yes.
do you have slides? Let me see if I
Yeah,
already, here we go.
the last slides. Okay,
All right.
so we now have the EAP Noob as the working group draft, and I'll just want to basically, I'll have a few slides of overview and to recall what it is, and then the remaining slides are kind of questions what to do next. So next slide. So basically, this is an out-of-band authentication method for EAP, and the reason to do it is that there isn't no such solution, but out-of-band authentication is commonly needed and used. Next slide. And basically, to kind of recall what is the design, what ideas there have been here in the design. So it's a EAP method with a focus on bootstrapping smart devices out of the box without any professional administration. And the method used there is this user-assisted out-of-band authentication, such as the user action could be, for example, scanning a dynamic QR code or NFC tag. And I should emphasize that they are dynamic tags or codes, not static printed ones in this protocol. And in addition to just authenticating the device once, EAP Noob registers the device to AAA. So that's where it differs from, I guess, all other EAP methods, that it does this initial registration also while authenticating for the first time. And then we have this fast re-authentication using the association created on the at the first instance. Okay, next slide. And this slide kind of is to explain how the protocol works. There is basically a Diffie-Hellman key exchange, which is authenticated with an out-of-band message. But we can get this out-of-band message to be a relatively short one by doing most of the communication in-band over EAP. And that's the trick, that EAP allows the unauthenticated device to talk to a server somewhere in the backend on the cloud. And then if we want, with radius routing, we can move that endpoint to anywhere where we want. And here in this picture, the user basically would scan a QR code. Well, once the key exchange is done, scan a QR code and deliver that. The QR code contains a URL, deliver that to the cloud server, and then maybe log in there, and then the device would be registered in the AAA server in the cloud with that user's account associated with it. Okay, so that was the overview, and then the status of things. So this shows the timeline. The latest action is basically the working group adoption, and there were just minor editorial updates to that version. And then the next slides are basically questions to you, kind of what to do next. So let's see the next, or maybe there is another status slide, yeah. So this is just to kind of recall that we have been working on this for quite a few years now, and there's an implementation that a little bit lags the drafts, but is again being updated. Kind of a version of it is being updated, and then we have done formal modeling of the protocols and both the protocol and the security of it. Okay, so next slide. So what I think needs to be done next is, here is some concrete things. One is this same issue that Jari had, that there is just one curve specified currently and one cipher suit with crypto suit. I'm not sure if I called it. It's called crypto suit in the draft. So we have a crypto suit that is has this curve 25519 and SHA-256. I guess I should call it, actually, we should call it X25519 to be pedantic. And but while we have only just one crypto suit, what can we can't really test the code for updating crypto suits, which is part of the protocol and something that we spend a lot of time modeling formally, and have kind of shown that it should be correct, but it's not been tested in practice. And there I would be happy to get suggestions of which curve to use. Is it this P256 that is the favorite, or something, of course, that is kind of commonly in use and where the code is easy to get. And then once we have that, then testing the cipher suit updates that with the implementation that it actually works. I think the code is not really tested, so it's not going to run just like that. And then another detail is this renumbering of the protocol messages, because there's been some evolution over the last 2 years and in the draft, and the message numbering is not exactly logical. So I think it might make sense to renumber the messages before, well, while we can still kind of get the implementers to do it and have them in a logical order. And then, of course, the implementation needs to be kept up to date with the current draft, which is now, again, I think, going reasonably well. Okay, so those, I think, are kind of easy questions. Then the next step, next slide, that is the last slide. So then my kind of overall question is, what else do we need to do to this draft to make progress and get to the working group last call eventually? Some things that I guess we do need is we need some reviews on just the general quality of the draft and the security of the security protocol. And then we need an EAP method number from IANA. And then it's been agreed already previously that we need to change the domain name that is used in the NAI from the current EAP noob.net to something that ends with ARPA. And there's a question kind of what name should we use? Noob.arpa or EAP noob.arpa, or do we actually want like a hierarchical namespace for noob.eap.arpa? And I don't have really an opinion on that, but someone else might have. Okay, so those are the kind of questions. I guess the two kind of questions where it would be nice to have input right away is which curve and hash function to choose for the second crypto suit, and also on what kind of ARPA name to choose.
Okay, we have Mohit in the queue.
Yeah, I was just noting that Russ and Eduardo would like to see P256 as the second curve. That's probably the sensible choice. So we should do that. I think I am still a co-author, but I was only involved in this work early on. And I have seen this draft evolve. So the message numbers have gone from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Then there was a message number 0. And I wasn't sure if you're going to now add -1 as the new message number, or is it going to be 9? So reordering them now makes sense, knowing that, you know, at some point there may be need for like new message types, but like starting cleanly now makes sense when it's still not like RFC yet. I guess both Joe and I can help you. Can put you in touch with IANA to get the EAP number. Not sure about the NAI. I think maybe Roman or Joe have some opinion. And I guess we can ask for early reviews from either or the security directorate, the IoT directorate, or perhaps both of them, because otherwise I agree that you know, this draft has been worked on for a couple of years or since 2016, so it's pretty stable otherwise.
Maybe I didn't catch. Could you restate the additional review we want to get?
Yeah, I was just saying that the draft is, as Thomas mentioned, is pretty mature and stable. So we can, this is just a suggestion, we can ask for early reviews from the security directorate and IoT directorate. So I'm not saying we should do last call yet. I think there's still these message renumbering things that should be sorted, but I don't see any reason why we can't send it to the directorates for an early review.
Oh, definitely. I completely agree.
And I think, Thomas, you can also use this time to like figure out the EAP method number. I think Joe, you are the expert on the registry, so perhaps you can help him, but not sure about the IAB domain name allocation.
Yeah, I think we'll have to put in a request for an early assignment, but we can handle that.
And I think Elliot had put me in touch with Wes, so I did inform him about this request for domain names for both Brewski and Noob. And Wes Hardiker from the IAB is currently studying the draft, so I guess we'll hear at some point. So let's wait until we get back an answer from the IAB about this domain name reservation.
All right. Elliot, did you have a?
Yeah, just on the last point, what Wes said in particular was that he would not be disposed to do an early allocation of this sort of thing, but on the question on the slide, I think it's very likely that Noob is the first of several methods that will need this sort of thing. So go with the right side rather than the left side there. In terms of I think they want to pollute all the .ARPA space. They're probably just going to want to have a simple name. And I don't think we have a formal request to the IAB yet on this, so that's something that chairs have to just drive.
Yeah, this noob.eve.arpa was something that I also suggested to Wes, but then he sent back to me that this would require setting up the subdomain and the zone for .eep. So yeah, I don't have a preference either way, and I agree that Noob is one of several that will request this special use domain. So yeah, let's wait and see for the IAB to come back to us on this.
Yeah, it could be, Mohit, that there's a little bit of confusion there on Wes's part. We should just make clear, we're not asking for any sort of zone support. We just want the name, we just want the hierarchical name reserve, that's all.
Right. I don't think any of these names should actually, like any DNS server should respond to this. So I did explain this situation to Wes. Maybe this is a question to Joe and Roman. Is there an official way of like sending a request to IAB, or how does it work?
It goes from the ISG to the IAB.
Right. I mean, it would be right if we want to do the official process. I mean, the other piece of help I can provide is I can push to make sure we just get an unofficial answer, because the more formalism we bring, it just ultimately brings delay. So I'm happy to take that. I mean, I can talk to Wes.
Okay. Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. Happy to do so.
Okay, so I guess we do early directorate reviews. Thomas will get in touch with Aina for the method number, and Roman helps us with the domain name. I guess we are done.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Thomas? All right, we have some time left, and we had another request for review for a presentation. So this is Sandeep. I think I saw you on the call.
Hi everyone. So this is the first time I'm here. So this is not as a presentation, not as a draft yet. So this work we haven't done any draft so far. So this is more like what are the things that we are currently doing, and what are the things that we are facing together with this EAP methods. So can we move to our next slides? Can somebody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah.
Yeah. So currently we are, me together with my colleague at Huawei. So we are looking at different IoT bootstrapping methods for bootstrapping devices, resource-constrained devices, or IoT devices, which we call simple device, together with more resourceful devices such as mobile phones. And we currently use out-of-band channel to transfer some information, which is later used which is used to secure bootstrapping process through in-band channel. And by bootstrapping, we mean which involves like pairing the device, taking ownership of this device, and then configuring this device to become operational. So we are currently working on these kinds of work. And what we are looking at EAP is, can we use EAP methods to do this device bootstrapping, including provisioning some long-term credential on the device from the controller device itself. So can we have another slide, please? So this is not the first time, first work that tries to address this provisioning of credential through EAP. We are aware of this deep creds and deep. So they are like they have some this provisioning, credential provisioning system as well. So can I have another slide, please? So what we are looking at is like using EAP as a mechanism to enable peer configuration from EAP authentication server, which can be used to provision credential as well as set some policies or do some configuration on the device. And we are trying to look at a simplest possible solution from implementation and specification point of view. So this is, as you all know, this is the generic EAP message flow. If we look at here, we have some common messages, and then there are messages going through underlying EAP method. And when the EAP method completes, there's a common success or failure message. What we want to add is, if we go to the next slide, we can add is this similar kind of a request response message flowing from server to the peer, which will include configuration messages. And these configuration messages are only to be sent after completing underlying EAP method, but before sending the success. We're still thinking like, should this success message should depend on the configuration response, or should it only or only depend on EAP method itself? Like if EAP authentication has succeeded, then even if the configuration messages fails, they still get this EAP success message. So this is we haven't looked into it so far. So can we go 2 slides more? So next slide is, this one is more like how this our configuration layer sits on top of EAP layer, and it simply uses EAP layer as a way of sending this configuration message parameter. So before moving forward, we should consider some of the issues that we currently have, like the EAP by default does not support this message fragmentation. So the simplest way would be to fit all the configuration messages in the single EAP message. And there's this push versus pull model where currently there's a request flowing from server to the client, but can we have client requesting the configuration parameter from the server? So should we think? We should think in this direction as well. And there should be a discovery mechanism where one endpoint will figure out whether the other endpoint supports this configuration messages at all or not. Then also about this configuration, security of the configuration messages, it could be based on EAP session key, or it could be derived from the master session key or EMSK itself. And we should try to minimize this configuration probing and the number of EAP messages total number of EAP messages that's being added. So in the next slide, please. We think like that there could be these following approaches that we could use is to simply define a new message type for configuration messages, and this EAP for EAP request and response messages that can be sent in either direction, or we use currently EAP has this notification message type, so we could simply use this notification message type to send configuration messages, or define some sort of a new EAP method that use existing EAP tunneling method like EAP creds. And also should also think we're also thinking like there could be another configuration protocol that will begin after that is independent of EAP altogether. So EAP will only set the necessary things to start another protocol after EAP session has ended. So there need to be a mechanism to convey to the both side that there will be another protocol coming, and we're thinking like maybe there could be a session binding between EAP session and another configuration protocol, for example, using some sort of a derived shared secret from EAP session, which could be used to verify it in the configuration protocol that will follow. So we are actually, we don't have a ready draft yet. We are just here to see, to get your viewpoint on this matter.
All right, we have a question in the queue. Do you want to take that now?
Yes. The next slide is just the ending slide. So yeah.
All right, Elliot.
The mute button there. Hi, Sandeep. Thanks
Hi.
for your presentation. Could you go back to slide 8, please? Yes, this one. I think your thinking is very much along my own, with some exceptions, but this is what led me down the path towards TEEP. First of all, one of the reasons is that the long-term credential messages are really already there. They're a little broken, as you heard earlier, but we're going to open that document up and clean that up. So I definitely like the direction. On fragmentation, that's handled in the TLS layer with TEEP, so you sort of get that for free if we can sort the other issues. Regarding the push-pull model, that's worth exploring, but definitely what you call push-pull, I call lockstep. So we're pretty much aligned on that point. The discovery mechanism is sort of built into TEEP as well, in terms of how you handle a message that you don't understand. You just discard it. And then it's up to the or you don't. It's up to each side to decide whether they think it's important or not. The rest of this, I think probably you and I are probably within of each other in terms of trying to sort this stuff. If we can figure out the rest of the TEEP discussion, and for that matter, what a long-term credential is. If we're going to open the TEEP document up for broader discussion, we can certainly open it up to that question as well, and would be interested in maybe working with you on that as we move forward.
All right, thanks.
Okay, we have do you have a response? Or
We'll definitely like to explore more in deep as well. So let's take another question at the moment.
Yep. So Thomas has a question.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on the push and pull question, because the way I understand it is there is kind of you can have two kinds of device configuration. One is the kind of DHCP type request where the device has an opportunity to ask for specific configuration options, and then the server responds to that. And then there could be just a kind of push where the server just tells everyone, announces to the device, what is your configuration? Here it is. Both of these result in slightly different communication patterns, I think, and the number of messages may differ, and then it comes to kind of how many round trips of traffic it creates.
Mohit?
Yeah, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so I think my general suggestion is as little changes to EAP as possible for doing what you want. So if it's, yeah, I mean, perhaps you could look at TEEP as well. But if you want to configure other types of credentials, or then either like 1 or 3 is better. Like I don't want like protocols like ACME and like many other these provisioning CMS, CMC, all that running over EAP, because EAP is often running over the link layer. So I like the idea of approach 3, that EAP finishes and you export a key from EAP that you then use in your favorite protocol, whether it's ACME or CMS or CM or whatever is your favorite protocol for provisioning, and whatever type of credential you want to provision. So it provides you like EAP, but then also doesn't like tightly couple the provisioning protocol with the authentication protocol, except the key. Or then one of the option 1 of just defining new message types, so that like new implementations that support this message type would do what you want to do, but at least existing implementations are like not broken or don't have to change.
Yes, we're also thinking about like having a minimal set of messages that could be used within a single frame, or one or a couple of messages that could be used for configuration, and that's it. Or if there is a need that the configuration messages are going to be too long, or provisioning messages are going to be complicated, then have this simple way of conveying this message to the peer or both the endpoints that, okay, we are going to start another protocol, and here are the primitives for this new or input for the new protocols to start. Some way of indicating and extracting some sort of a shared secret.
So my suggestion would be to think of what EAP method are you going to use for the actual authentication, and then see whether that EAP method allows you to send whatever is the information you want to send. So like is there some field in that EAP method that allows you to send some small configuration data that will be used later in a separate protocol? But without like deciding on which EAP method is used for authentication, it becomes a little bit harder. That's only a suggestion, though.
So can't we have some sort of a general indication that we are starting this next protocol altogether, like sending some sort of payload within this notification messages?
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So the reason why we like doing the full configuration in EAP is that it simplifies operations a lot. For one reason is you don't have to set up tunneling and what have you in order to do the rest of the configuration and manage authorization and authentication, you know, at a later stage. It doesn't require that you have an L3 address to do whatever additional configuration you need, because you might need to do some configuration before you even get that. So there's good reason to want to do that sort of stuff. That's why TEEP had it in the first place. The second point that I was going to say is that when you start to do when you start to point to things that are outside of EEP, when you start to do that binding, then you have to do the binding A across sessions, B potentially across devices, and so you can introduce a lot more complexity in actually not putting stuff into EEP. So we should be careful about, you know, exactly what layer we want to solve this in. And I say this, you know, having seen attempts to do this with EST and other componentry, and you know, I know what the operational layout is, and you know, the access control functions get pretty ugly, particularly at L3.
Okay, any other questions? So Sandeep, I think, you know, there's some interest here. I suggest you get together with some of the people who commented and kind of work through some of the issues and see, you know, where, you know, what you can use with existing things and what we might want to do new.
Thank you, everyone. I'll definitely look at this, how TEEP is going forward. And thank you for everyone for your valuable input. I hope to see you next time.
All right, I think that's at the end of the agenda. We have a couple minutes. Is anybody any other comments or questions?
I have one quick question to the group and to you and Roman. We'll have a meeting in July. Should we request a session for July, or is it too soon, and should we just do an interim later when things have progressed? What do people feel about that?
From my point of view, I think we probably want to request a session. I think we have a couple documents that we're going to be trying to move forward. There should hopefully have activity on TEEP in this you know, interim period, and we'd be hopeful that we would have things to discuss.
All right. Yeah.
I concur with that.
Yep. July sounds good then.
This is Russ. Yari, I sent you the reference.
Well, thanks everyone. Want to make sure everybody signs the blue sheets, the attendance sheets. It is requested that you provide your affiliation. I noticed some people had signed and not provide their affiliation, so please do. Other than that, we'll chat again in July. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye, and be safe.